Bonsoir mes chers amis, bienvenue au Forum électoral. Il s'agit de la 4e session et ce soir, j'anime un Zoom sur un sujet qui est un peu délicat et s'appelle les lieux de culte en zone résidentielle. Vous savez certainement que depuis le début de la campagne, j'anime un Zoom chaque semaine. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to the election forum. At the beginning of the campaign, I offered residents a list of subjects, and tonight we were supposed to discuss Meadowbrook. However, I was requested to host a Zoom about non-conforming religious uses in residential zones, so I've decided to postpone the video and presentation about Meadowbrook until next week, same time, same station. If you're interested, please join us. Now, to get back to the subject at hand, I accepted to do this subject for a bunch of reasons. En tant qu'élu, chaque conseiller est appelé à prendre des décisions difficiles, des décisions qui affectent les droits des résidents dans leur chez-soi, leur santé, leur bien-être et leur maison. They say a man's home is his castle, and the peaceable enjoyment of where we live is sacred. That is why people like to live in Côte-Saint-Luc. But when that peaceable enjoyment is disturbed, then residents have a right to complain and to ask the city to intervene and impose order and even make others follow the rules. So now that I have said this often enough, I will repeat it again. Côte-Saint-Luc is a city of tolerance. We have tolerated non-conforming places of worship for a very long time, but we've never had a situation that has created such division in the community. Alors, à la lumière de toute la polémique qui entoure cette question, je voulais reconnaître qu'il existe un problème et que nous avons des solutions. Et c'est pour ça que j'ai invité Monsieur le maire, Mayor Brownstein is on the call. Good evening, Mayor Brownstein. I also invited Jeff Kovac, who is the candidate in District 6. I also invited some residents from District 6. Hi, Heather. I see now that you did get on, so that's great. Who are the ones who asked me to review this subject, and also a resident of my district, District 3, who has an existing synagogue on Bailey that has been there for many, many years and is actually quite accepted in the community. I feel he's very well accepted in the community. And eventually, we're not going to resolve these issues tonight, but eventually we're going to have a discussion, and the mayor's going to sort of spell it out for us about how we're going to deal with these non-conforming uses and how we're going to manage the conflicts of use, and also how we're going to integrate certain religious uses into our community, because there is a great demand to have more and more religious institutions in Côte-Saint-Luc. So it's not that it's particular to this district, but every councillor, when elected, is going to have to make decisions with regard to these issues. And so I have asked the mayor to address us on this question, and I think he has something important to say. And then we can open it up to a broader discussion. Without further ado, I'm going to ask Mitchell I'll call you Mitchell, but you to address this issue, which we all know is an issue within our community. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Dita. So it's wonderful being here. I'm sorry that I do have to leave at 8 because I'm going from one Zoom to another Zoom. I'm going to the Zoom with Oren Sabag for District 1 right after this. So I will make my comments, and I won't be able to stay for the whole meeting, but I hope that I'll be very clear. Okay, so this is how the situation evolved in the city of Côte-Saint-Luc. As we know, the city of Côte-Saint-Luc was a Jewish community, was arriving after the Second World War, and we had some wonderful institutions that were built, like the Beth Zion and the Fair Beth David Jerusalem. They were properly zoned, and these communities, these synagogues, worked with the city of Côte-Saint-Luc to build a beautiful city. which is the city of Côte Saint-Luc. And they were properly zoned and they thrive. They thrive based on support from the residents, our community, who joined as members. And then history moved on. And for the most part, people went to synagogue in areas that were properly zoned. The odd smaller synagogue opened up, and there were one or two, and they were accepted in the community. Most those were in proximity to other zones that were already zoned religious institution, and they were accepted. But there was not a proliferation of many. In the last 10 years, there were several that came up, but in the last 5 years, there were many that have just popped up. If everybody could be muted except me, we won't hear backup sound. So I think you, Mark, can do that. You can mute everybody. You know, you won't have any background sound. And if I have to unmute myself, I will. But you should mute everybody. I don't see it working. I still seem to. Perfect. All right. So then basically we try to work for a in a community like Côte Saint-Luc, trying to bring Jewish life to the community. Of course, we want to have that, but at the same time, we have to respect the residential character of our neighborhoods. So individuals shouldn't think that they could just open up a religious institution on a residential zone without applying for a permit, without following all the rules that are required in a democratic society. But it seems that the tolerance that was allowed historically evolved into mushroom of effect. So now we have received certain parts of the community that are not happy. They don't know. They buy a house today and they don't know tomorrow if that house next door is going to become used for other purposes. And there's a concern for every member of our community that the next door neighbor could just turn their home into a religious institution, whether it's zoned or not, because of the historical tolerance of the city. So what we did is we drafted a PCMY bylaw. What that means is that every institution that has non-conforming status will receive a letter giving them a certain amount of time to apply for an additional usage, meaning a change of zoning, to allow them to exist where they are. And it will be subject to referendum and registry and referendum process, which means basically like any zoning change, the neighbors decide whether that particular institution has been integrated into the community and they're happy with it, they want it to stay or not. But before we do that, we're going to the strip malls and we're going to be adding additional usages to the strip malls in order that in the event that certain homes will no longer be allowed to exist in residential streets, that they will be able to go to strip malls, which will automatically have the additional use of institution religious zones. Similarly to, we have a community above Adar that is working there, but at least they're not in a residential zone. You know, the hope is we you know, I feel that the communities that built the wonderful synagogues that we have, whether it's Beth Rambam or Or Chaim or Tiferet Bet David Jerusalem, you know, Beth Israel Beth Aaron, these synagogues deserve to be supported, and we hope that they can prosper and grow with members as well. So there's that issue that we want all the mainstream synagogues to prosper and to do well and to have membership. And we know that many have already second minions going on in basements or in other rooms, which is a good thing, and it helps them continue to keep those institutions alive. And and we hope that many of the institutions that are not properly zoned will either amalgamate or move into strip malls. Now, we're also doing it for the people in these zones, because right now they're not required to have sprinkler systems. They're not required to have emergency exits. They're not required to have proper beams to hold up the floor should people be dancing after a simcha. So you need to have proper zoning if you're going to have certain activities, and people should feel safe when they go to pray or have activities and know that they're going to a place that is properly zoned and is regulated by the city to ensure their safety. So this process is long overdue, and we are going to be moving forward with it. And I think it's to the benefit of the entire community, whether those who enjoy the religious institutions. There will be a place for everyone in Côte Saint-Luc, but it has to be in a place that's acceptable for everyone. And I'm confident that, you know, the one or two from 25 years past will, for many reasons, be accepted by those areas because they've been there for 25, 30 years. But the ones that have been popping up all the time, particularly in the last 5 years, if we don't do something now, it's just going to keep on going, and it's not good for anybody. It's not good for the institutions. It's not good for the neighbors. It's just not fair to the residents of Côte Saint-Luc. So that's the way in which we're going to move, and we're going to do it in the fairest way possible so that everybody has an opportunity to understand what we're doing and move in a positive direction where there will be a place for everyone in our city, but it won't be against the wishes of the neighbors who live on those streets, because they have the final say. In a register and referendum process, you need 12 signatures. If you go into different zones, you also can get 12 signatures. And based on all those zones, there is a referendum and the majority decide yes or no to add that additional usage. So it is, in fact, the residents that have the final say as to whether they like it, they want it there or not. So that's the procedure.
Okay, well, I think that's very clear. I'm going to open it to questions, especially because you are leaving at 8 o'clock. So I see a few hands are going up. I know that in particular, Mickey has asked me to share something with you before you leave, so that I'm going to ask him to do that as well. And I'm going to take questions. If you want to raise your hands, if everyone knows how to raise their hand. Okay, so you can raise your hand this way, or you can raise your hand on the screen. Either works. So I'm going to go to Liat first, and then we'll go to you, Heather. Thank you, Mayor Brownstein. Maybe before I take the questions, I should say that, you know, I've been a counselor for a long time. This is now being held against me. I've been counselor for a very long time. And a lot of the tolerance that we have now experienced is being, you know, we're being told, well, you tolerated it, yes, but there was a way of doing things. And in my district, for example, Armand Moyal is on the call. We do have one synagogue that has been there for over 30 years and has, in my view, the social acceptability of the neighborhood. And that's one way of understanding how these institutions can be integrated. The other thing is that there's a whole issue of tax exemption, which we'll discuss in a minute, because that's the other aspect of it. So there's two aspects to this issue. One is the issue of how these places of worship integrate into a neighborhood and how they affect the basically the life and the peaceable enjoyment of the neighborhood. So there's the conflicts of uses there. And then there's the issue of the tax exemption, which
Right.
has become another major issue.
I want to be clear that the city has authority over zoning, and it's the issues of garbage and noise and usage that concern a city. Tax exempt status is determined by the province, and some of these institutions have applied for tax exempt status based on being able to prove that they are either using the facility for religious purposes or based on the nunnery exemption, meaning they're using it for study, for religious study purposes. But that has nothing to do with the city. That's not the area we control. That's a provincial control over whether they pay taxes or not. But of course, if they didn't exist because in that location, because of illegal zoning, they would not be able to get a tax exempt status from the province.
Right, so it all starts from the tolerance that the city gives. And once the city is tolerant, then they apply for tax exempt status. And because the usage is for a religious purpose, they get the tax exempt status. So there's a whole history behind that, which is a subject for another municipal law lecture, but would now go to Liat, and you can open your mic and ask your question. Go ahead, Liat.
Do you want Mickey to go first? You said before?
Well, maybe because of the time. Okay, Mickey, do you want to go first? Go ahead. Thank you. You have to turn on your, open your mic, Mickey. I don't know what he's doing. I told him to go first and he got up and left.
Okay,
Okay,
I can
so
I
Liat
can
will
go.
go. Liat,
I
you
can
do
go.
it.
Yes.
Okay.
So Mayor Bronson, thank you for this
Mitch, please call me
interesting
Mitch.
audio. Yeah. I don't really agree with the process of the referendum because most of the synagogues happen in neighborhoods which, whether or not they go to that synagogue, they will support it because they are good friends or know each other or whatever. So I'm not sure that's the best way to go about it. But for me, what bothers me is that they do pop up like mushrooms after the rain. They are dangerous not only for people inside, but also for people outside. So, for example, when kids come up, they go on the streets and it's very dangerous for traffic to pass by. And what bothers me also is the tax exemption, which I understand is a provincial matter, but how many tax exemption can one family, can one kollel, can one rabbi claim? I mean, I pay my taxes, you pay your taxes, Dida, you pay your taxes, everybody here who owns a property, we pay our taxes. And I understand that nunnery or rabbis can get an exemption and this is very acceptable, but for one property, not for multiple properties by the same person, that is really taking advantage of everybody and really messing with the system. So I'm not sure that's the best way to go about it. And the fact that they keep popping in a residential area means that they are non-zoned and get the exemptions and make fun of all of us. There's this one property in particular that keeps on changing hands that is very detrimental to all of the neighborhood, and that's in my district in particular. I'm not in District 8 where Dida lives, I'm in District 6.
I'm
Right, but really,
you're in
Liat,
District 6.
there is no other procedure. I mean, if whether we sent them a letter saying you have illegal status right now, shut down, would not stop anybody from applying for a zoning change, right? Anyhow, you could apply for a zoning change for your house. We're just giving them a notice saying you have to apply for a zoning change now because you don't have right status. But even if we didn't say that, if we sent them a letter saying you're shut down tomorrow, they'd say, okay, but we're going to apply for a zoning change. So it's the same thing. Now, the referendum process, I think, and registry process, I think Dida could explain as chair of town planning. And, she has a lot of knowledge in it. It's not so easy to pass. And just because the immediate neighbors might feel that it's okay doesn't mean that they get all the votes, because there's contiguous zones and so on and so forth. So, it depends on the neighborhood. But I don't know if you want to go into that at this point, Dida, or later after I leave. But
Well,
it might be a nice lesson to explain how.
I will do that. I'll take my time to do that. But just because you are leaving, so Liat, your question will be responded to. Mickey, I wants to show you something before you do go, because I understand you have to go to another Zoom at 8 o'clock. So go ahead, Mickey. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much. I just had to. My son is just watching TV next to me, and I had to mute his TV before I spoke. That's why I got up.
Okay.
But anyways, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you remember me, but in 2017, I came to council one night. I asked you for the same question that Liat just asked you, the same question that popped up in the chat, which was how many synagogue, how many illegal synagogues there were in Côte Saint-Luc. I call them illegal synagogues. I don't call them pop-ups. I don't call them temporary. I really call them illegal synagogue. I don't call them unzoned. This started my whole process that I went down with the city. It started in 2017. You asked me to make a request to access to information in it took 2 years to receive for the access to information request to have a hearing date. And I was in touch with Jonathan Schechter, and just before, on the night before the hearing, and we had settled it, and he gave me a partial list of the illegal synagogues, of the places that were tax exempt on my street for the most part. I live on Eldridge, and so that's a little bit about my journey, and I've come to council a few times and asked you questions. I finally got a list just a few months ago. But the reason that I'm here is I live on Eldridge, and there's many just on my street. There's many. There's rabbis' homes on my streets that are tax exempt. There's 2 synagogues on my street. There's Also, there's a dormitories.
Mickey, why don't you just share what you have? And
Okay, and I'm going to do it now.
I think a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? We know that expression. So
Let me just get it. This is my street. If you look here, all of these are duplexes. If you look here, can you see it? Have we shared it?
yes, yes, we can. Yes.
5712 is a duplex. 57. So there's actually two residences. So the 5712, 14, 5716, and 18, 5724, and 26, and 5756. And those are all tax exempt properties. That's just on one side of the street, just on 2 blocks. This is the block on Eldridge between Guelph and Kildare. And then this is after on Eldridge, the block where Heather lives between Kildare and Mackle. On the other side of the street, there's 2 synagogues, Congregation Bet Yosef Meir and Congregation, and just 3 doors down, Congregation Sharei Tfilah. That's on the other side of the street. Those properties are not tax exempt yet. But those are synagogues at the same time. So I wanted to share with you. I wanted to share with you the results of what I had. I found out that there was 27 tax exempt properties in Côte Saint-Luc. That includes the synagogues that you mentioned before, and the legitimate rabbis' homes, which is to say the one rabbi's house that is affiliated with the main synagogues. But at the same time, I found that there was about 7 to 10 that were questionable.
That's correct. The rest are Miriam homes, synagogues, and rabbi residences. But
right, there's priests who live in Côte
Saint-Luc. There were 7, and now I believe there's more. But our last count was 7. But now I think it might. I know it's up.
Right, but this is just this. I'm just talking to. I just prepared this map just of my street that you can see here.
Well, that's the main street in Côte Saint-Luc that has the most, for sure.
Right, and it goes without saying, when we moved here, my wife and I were the youngest people on the street, and there was none of these existed. The only one that existed is at 571214, where the rabbi lived as his house. But before
Mickey, I think, yeah, go ahead.
There was a picture. Can you share the picture I sent you about 5750?
Oh wow.
Sharei Tfilah. There was a picture.
Oh boy, I don't know if I have it. I have to. Also, I need you to stop sharing.
Oh, okay.
While the mayor answers, maybe I'll find it.
I am going to have to go to another meeting, but I want to say, Mickey, that you can consider yourself one of the pioneers for moving this issue forward. So I'll thank you for all your work. It always takes residents being involved, and you have been involved in this issue. I know not everybody agrees, and that's fine. There's a part of the community that thinks it's very good to have these institutions on residential streets, but in the end, we have decided, and I hope to receive the support of those newly elected officials, because you never know who's going to be the makeup of the upcoming council. But I hope to receive the majority support of the upcoming council to allow us to move forward in the manner in which I am suggesting. And that's why we already drafted the PCM bylaw, but now we have to move forward and put it into force. So with that being said, I do thank you again, Mickey, for all your work, and we're going.
I just wanted to add one last thing but the reason is not that I'm opposed to them being here. Period. It's that in the last little while, there's been much more traffic and garbage.
Exactly.
Even aggression among residents, because who are unhappy. Some who are unhappy of the status. Some who are unhappy of being said anything. So it's caused a lot of turmoil just in our neighborhood because of this.
I think we're going to go through a difficult period moving this forward, but I think the end result is going to be positive for the entire community. And
right.
We'll have better harmony. And as I said to you, Mickey, when I spoke to you on the phone, I believe it was yesterday, I've directed public security to go down Eldridge on a regular basis now because of the exact thing you're showing me in this picture. In order to, give warnings, tickets, and ensure that the street is properly maintained, because I know it's out of control.
Thank
And
you.
they are going, from my knowledge. I get reports all the time that they're going now.
Yeah, well, thank you for acknowledging that it's out of control, because it's been so for a long time.
Yeah, so I really have to thank the mayor for clarifying our position. For me, that position was very clear. It started 4 years ago when we got the new mandate with the new council, I would call it, when the councillors came on, and I said, let's try and do a moratorium, but let's just put a cap on it and no more after this date. And that was already 2017, 2018. And unfortunately, we did not move fast enough because of certain resistance, shall I say, on the council. And that's why we're in an election period. And I think it's very important that residents choose elected officials who are going to represent their point of view on this council. And so that's why I felt that this discussion, both for District 3 and for District 6, is an important discussion to have, because I'm being very transparent and open about how I feel. I think that we have definitely tolerated for a long time, and that was good. And I'm prepared to almost accept certain institutions that have existed in our community for a long time. And I put into that category, this is me talking now, I put into that category, for example, the Shoulon Bailey that is led by Armand Moyal. And I even put into that category, and I've said this at council, and I've said this to all my colleagues, the synagogue at Park Haven, which came to us about 10 years ago when Anthony was mayor, and said, look, we are in a double duplex, or we're having a lot of people, we need to be safe. And we said, fine, thank you very much. You leaving, or you just saying goodbye? Okay, you're muted, but we hear the goodbye. Thank you. So there are, we have to put it in the balance. It's a very delicate issue, and it's not completely, black and white. We can't just shut everyone down, and we can't just tolerate everyone, right? We can't, there's like two extremes, and we have to find the delicate balance that we can walk. So there are certain institutions in our community that have that social acceptability, and I just mentioned 2 of them, and maybe there's more. But there are others that have not sort of gained that respect of the neighborhood, and also have in some ways abused the system. So that's where we're going to have to move forward and be firm and be clear as to how we're going to address this issue. I don't know if I'm making myself clear enough, or if you have other questions. So Daniel Levison asked a question. He asked a question, which was, let me go to his question. Does the city know? Yes, we do. We do, but they are more and more every day. Daniel, in the map that Mickey showed us a few minutes ago, there are 2 congregations that do not have tax exempt status on Eldridge, but are on Google. You can find them easily, and they are raising funds, and you know what I mean? Like they are going concerns. They don't have tax exempt status, but they definitely have a lot of activity, and they are definitely fully operating synagogues. So we do. Now, will long-standing tolerances give non-conforming institutions a legal, hang on, I'm reading your question, a legal acquired right which the city won't be able to overcome with any attempt to make them subject to no, this is what we're saying. We're saying we're going to send them a notice, exactly what the mayor just said. Maybe I have to repeat it so it's clear. Send them a notice saying, if you want to legalize your status, then you can apply for a zoning change, and that'll be subject to register and referendum of the neighborhood, of the district, very much like we did for the tempos, very much like we did when we implemented the tempo bylaw. So the tempo bylaw, I happen to have it right here, and it's an interesting reference. I see Bayla's on the phone, so she'll really appreciate this. You see the city of Côte Saint-Luc and I can put it up later. Everything is gray, mostly gray because it's all tempos. But there's only three sort of little sectors in my district, one in around Sabin and one in the musical streets that didn't accept the tempos. So what we did is basically we said we want to introduce tempos across the city, but it was sector by sector. So in certain sectors it was accepted, mostly accepted, and in some sectors it was not. And that's what we think is going to happen with this general bylaw that we're going to adopt in order to regularize, legalize the non-conforming uses. That gives you a sort of an idea of the process. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. Let me see again. I do see a lot of people who have a lot of good ideas though. So I would invite you to speak up if you want to address this issue. Okay, so Tracy's asking which councillors have supported these pop-up synagogues. It's not so much which councillors, it has to be, I think there's got to be I could say there was a general consensus on council that we needed to move this thing forward, but we had to have the courage of our convictions. And as you know, we got all entangled in the issue of the rezoning on Mackle, which was quite an interesting exercise. So I think councillors have to realize that we have to put forward projects that will succeed, and not put forward projects that are going to blow up in our face. From Freddie Lieber, what happens if when sent a notice to apply for zoning, they just ignore the notice? Okay, so that's a good question. We've obviously, discussed that issue. Then we would have the whole process of, trying to shut them down. Then we would go to the legal process of trying to shut them down, which might or might not lead to protracted litigation. However, I do feel that most of them would at least attempt to comply, knowing that we were getting into this process. But yes, that's definitely an issue that, we don't want to have protracted litigation with quite a few now, and maybe 7, maybe 10 non-conforming religious either places of worship or uses, because some of the uses are not just worship, it's kind of like school, educational purpose, things like that, which is also not allowed in a residential zone. Next question from Sandy, why don't you just shut them down now? They are illegal. Yes, that's a question that we started with in 2017, I would say. There was no appetite on council to just do that. We wanted to find a way to harmonize certain, how should I put this, to integrate some that, and I'm giving you the example of the synagogue that I have in my district, which 30 years ago, there was an attempt to shut it down, and they went to municipal court and they went to a higher court, and it didn't succeed. So there were all kinds of procedural issues, but that's not the way to manage this from the get-go. I mean, we have to try in a more how should I put it, in a reconciliatory way than to just go and shut them down. Yes, est-ce que quelqu'un veut ajouter quelque chose? I hear you, Sandy. Is everyone reading her comment? They did it in Outremont, they did it in Saint Leonard. I could tell you there was a mosque in Saint Leonard that popped up, and they went to court, and they actually succeeded, because there is a charter argument. See, where does all this come from? Sandy, you want to say something? No, okay. Daniel, I think your mic, your audio is on. There is a charter argument to the right of religious places of worship to exist in zones that are not zoned for that purpose. And the charter argument is there's freedom of religion, and some people would say, for example, in this case of this mosque in Saint Leonard, we have nowhere to pray. We have nowhere to pray. And so they hired a lawyer, and the lawyer argued, you know, they have nowhere to pray, they live in the district, they need a place of worship. And that is a charter argument that holds some water. Now, in the case of Côte Saint-Luc, these are, you know, people of the Jewish faith who we could say have many places to pray. There's like 29 places to pray. Like, well, not 29, but at least I showed you at the map at the beginning, there's at least 7 large institutions where there's plenty of room to pray. But it could be argued, you know, well, we don't pray that way, we pray this way, and we don't want to do it, you know, according to those rules, we want to do it according to our rules. So that's the charter argument that is sort of the basis of this tolerance towards places of worship. And that definitely comes into play here. So that's why we don't just shut them down. And I think that, you know, is understandable under the circumstances, but there is, you know, it's gotten out of hand and we need to find solutions. Yes, anyone want to comment further? Does Joe, is that a hand I see, or no, no, okay. Does anyone have any comments or any questions? Yes, Heather.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to be repeating what Mickey said. Since I live right across the street from the synagogue and a few doors down from the one at the corner, it's very annoying. I've been complaining for 4 years and nothing has been done. And especially there are semi-detached duplexes, so people that live next door ended up moving because a lot of people work at home. They can't handle the noise, the traffic, the garbage. They park their cars 3 times a day. They're there. They park their cars from early Friday to Saturday evening, and people have sold their duplexes. Renters have moved. I'm living here 38 years. It was a quiet, peaceful neighborhood, and it is no longer. So something has to be done.
I'd like to put my 2 cents in if I can. Okay. I've never seen anything like this here in my life. And
Could you please identify? Oh,
Jerry.
it's Jerry. Hi, Jerry. Sorry, I didn't see you on the screen. Go ahead.
Pardon the expression, I'm totally pissed off on this whole thing since the mayor and the council can't do anything about it. If I were selling drugs out of my house, somebody would report me, they'd send the police and they'd arrest me. Why? Because it's illegal. I know from the council themselves have said it is illegal. So if it's illegal, why are they allowing to stay in? You know why? Because time is on their side. The longer they stay there, the less you can do. Okay. So if it's going to be done, if something is going to be done about this here, I had a man come over to next door. He was going to sell the house about 1.5 years ago. And he's standing in my driveway, in our driveway, and he's looking at the house. And I said, "Oh, you're looking to buy?" He says, "Yeah, possibly." I said, "You're going to open up a yeshiva here and a synagogue?" He says, "Well, why not? You people have synagogues all over the place." I said, "Pardon me? My people?" He says, "Yeah, you Ashkenazis."
Okay, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to stop right there because that's not a conversation that I would like to have on this Zoom.
Okay.
I would like us to refrain from having this kind of conversation because I feel that this is what's happened to us so far. There's been a lot of division in the community, and I think that we have to find a way to move forward and to look at it really as a zoning issue, as a tax exemption issue, and not to start, you know, pitting one community against the other, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy right now, and it's not just one group or another. It happens to be a situation of, you know, that's actually happening in all communities.
Yeah, but they feel that they're entitled.
Okay.
There's too much
I understand. But I would like to stop the conversation right there if that's possible. I appreciate your intervention. I've listened, and I'm trying my very best. Jerry, don't run away. And I think
I
that,
have to run
you know,
away because I'm watching the Boston hockey game and I missed
okay,
the
that's
first
good.
goal.
That's probably more interesting. So anyway, Jeff is on the call, and the reason he's on the call is because he's looking to represent District 6. And I think that he's, you know, very capable of moving this issue forward. I am committed to it. You have heard the mayor now is committed to it. And I think we have to vote for elected officials who are going to move this issue forward and not drag it any longer, not delay and not give excuses. Okay, so I am totally committed as the chair of the Urban Planning Committee up until now. I have tried to enforce certain rules, and I will continue to do so. And I just want to open a parenthesis here. It also has to do with, you know, what the city did, for example, when we agreed to sell land to the Kollel to build the property on Mackle. You know, a city is not obliged to sell public land to a private nonprofit, be the you know, a nonprofit organization. We did it in the case of Chabad because they were looking for a place, and we did it, and I'm very happy we did it. It worked out very well. Chabad is, you know, at the end of Kildare in front of Bialik School. They found a good place. It was public land. We sold it at a fair price, and everyone is happy. It took a while. It took quite a while to find a good place for them to build that.
But they built a building,
But they built a building.
not a house.
On public land, exactly. Now, to be fair, the Kollel came to us and asked us to sell them land so that they could go from a non-conforming to a conforming. They wanted to be legal, right? They wanted to trade in Park Haven for a legally zoned synagogue. And they did that in 2015. They came to us and they offered us, they said, look, we will trade in, we will swap Park Haven if you allow us to build something on Mackle. And I agreed to it. There was absolutely, that was a fair deal. I agreed to it. We offered the rezoning on Mackle next to the Cavendish Mall at the CLSC entrance. And unfortunately, that rezoning failed. The residents voted it, well, they didn't vote it down, but they protested, and it was clear that rezoning was not going to pass. Then in 2017, they came back and they said, now would you please do what you did for Chabad? So that's a fair request. Give us some public land. We will buy it at fair market value. And they offered to pay fair market. It was evaluated and they offered to pay fair market. And that is the hump at the Public Works, next to the Public Works yard between the dog park and the Public Works. The only issue there was, and the reason I voted against that sale was, in my view, I felt that if we're going to sell them a piece of land, they should at least give up all their non-conforming uses. And at that point, they said no, they changed their mind. So myself, Ruth Kovac, Jeff's mom, and Stephen Early, we voted against the sale because we felt that sale should only go through with conditions, with reasonable, just, and fair conditions. The council agreed. Nonetheless, the majority agreed. They pushed the sale through. And the result is the fiasco that we know, which is the rezoning on Mackle, where they came with an 8-story building on the sidewalk. That didn't go very well in the neighborhood, as you know, so that failed too. So now they're coming back again. They still have an option. They still want to move forward. If it's fair, if it's just, we can move it forward, but there has to be conditions. So I'm committed to doing things fairly and in the best interests of all the residents of Côte-Saint-Luc, but not just to give in without fair and just conditions. I hope I made myself clear on that. So that's one part of it, you know. So there's sort of many moving parts to this issue. But the first is that the people on the streets where this is happening are becoming very, very uncomfortable and very, it's basically disturbing their peaceable enjoyment. And it's not just one group, it's many. I know there's, different streets have different groups that have been, taken possession of homes and duplexes. It's not just one group, and that's why there's lots of moving parts to this. We have to find a way to resolve it.
Yeah, I have to go.
Does anyone else want to say
Yeah,
something?
I want to say something in relation with what you said now about the Kollel. I'm all for them having their property. I just don't think that Michael is the right place. Maybe somewhere next to Chabad, you have a lot of land there. The city has, maybe that will be better, because I was concerned with different aspects like the Maimonides and the park and other things. But something else is coming to my mind. So I'm in District 6, like you said, and one of the candidates here, Lior Azarad, he is right-hand man to the Kollel. How is that going to be, if he gets elected in District 6, how is that going to be handled in council with all their requests? He can't wear two hats, one being the right-hand man of the Kollel and being on their lobbying, and one as a councillor. It's really a conflict of interest that's like pure and simple.
Well, I think if that happens, the legal advice he would get is that he would probably have to recuse himself from any discussions with regard to the rezoning of religious institutions or the Kollel or anything like that, because he could be in a conflict. But we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. And right now, that's why we're having this debate, is to see who is the candidate that could best represent the interests of the residents on this particular issue. So thank you for raising that question. It's definitely something to take into account. Who else wants to say? Armand, est-ce que tu veux dire quelque chose ou tu écoutes? You're on mute, Armand. Vous êtes sur il faut allumer le micro.
Ah, ok, on
Ouais.
m'entend là?
Oui.
Bon, moi, écoute, j'ai suivi toutes les discussions. Je suis déjà au courant plus ou moins de tout ce que vous avez dit, tout ce que vous avez comment ça vous avez étalé. Nous, comme tu l'as déjà dit, on est là depuis 85 et ça fait 36 ans, ça fait 37e année qu'on a fait les grandes fêtes. Et que j'espère que personne ne va s'opposer contre nous. C'est la seule chose que j'ai à dire. On attend patiemment. Nous, on nous a promis, vous savez, ça fait le 5e, je ne me rappelle pas, c'est le 4e ou 5e maire qui nous avait promis déjà pour le zonage. On a commencé avec le maire Lang. Un jour, je l'ai rencontré quand il n'était plus... Quand il y avait la fusion, il m'a dit, la seule chose que je regrette, c'est de ne pas pousser pour qu'il y ait le zonage, comme ça, tu aurais été tranquille. Après lui, il y avait Bob Liebman, il m'a promis la même chose. Après, c'était, je crois, comment il s'appelle,
Anthony, oui.
Oui, Anthony, exact.
Oui.
Et maintenant, il y a
Oui.
Michael Brownstein.
Oui.
Alors, ça fait, chaque fois qu'il y a un, il dit, il n'y a pas de problème, vous êtes là depuis longtemps, vous faites pas personne ne se plaint de vous, tout est correct. Et chaque fois, il y a un autre maire. Alors, j'espère que cette fois-ci, ça va être la dernière et que ça s'arrange.
Et c'est exactement ça que je voulais soulever. You see, in life, and like in zoning, like in everything else, there's nuances. And so we have a situation here where, as I explained before, this particular group has been there for 30 years. I don't think there are any objections. I see some residents, some neighbors on the street. We can maybe discuss it offline later. I don't know if they want to talk about it now, but in general, I have never heard any objections or any complaints. So we have to take that into balance. And that's why I said right at the beginning that we are considering, putting in this offer of rezoning those places that are acceptable. And there are certain that will pass, and those that don't pass will be invited to go to strip malls or to other locations that do have the proper zoning. And that's why we put everything in motion, and we wanted to do it before the election. It didn't happen, but it's definitely going to happen if we get reelected. If the mayor gets reelected, if I get reelected, and if Jeff gets elected. And I see Jeff has his hand up. So would you like to say something, Jeff?
Just very quickly. Premièrement, Rav Moyal, tu sais que mon fils est vraiment, vraiment contente d'être chez toi pour les Shabbats. Eitan loves you very much. I know that you have a respected and very loved synagogue on Bailey. You are a pillar of the community in that area. And one thing that I can say is that because you've integrated the community, vous étiez une personne pas seulement intégrée dans la communauté, mais des personnes ont été intégrées dans votre communauté. Ça, c'est la raison. Tu es vraiment une personne tellement respectée pendant, ça fait déjà combien, 35, 40 ans?
37 ans, disons. 37
okay.
ans.
37 ans. I personally believe, et si vous avez des questions, Rav Moyal, tu peux me poser en français. אם אתה רוצה לדבר איתי בעברית, זה גם בסדר. But I will speak to you in English, okay? So everyone is understanding. I think that the main concern here is that the other synagogues that have popped up over the last few years have not done so in the same method that Rav Moyal has done with his synagogue since 1985. It has not been a level of integration that the vast majority of residents, especially many of you here today, many people are opposed to how they have not integrated into the community, whether it be the trash related issues, the noise related issues. I've spoken to many of you, including Mickey. I've heard some horrific stories of intimidation, of aggression, and it brings tears to my eyes because I've lived in Côte St. Luc since I'm a newborn baby. In 1975, when my parents moved to Côte St. Luc, I've been here my whole life. With the exception of 3 years living in Israel, Côte St. Luc has been my home, and I have never heard of anything even remotely close over the last 46 years of my life happening in Côte St. Luc. What I've heard and I've spoken to people and I've seen with my own eyes happen in Côte St. Luc over the last number of years. And my late mother would say, it's important to identify the problem, but it's even more important to identify the solutions. And anyone can go ahead and talk for a long time about all of the problems that we're facing, but it's another thing that we need to identify the potential solutions. So I will reiterate what Mayor Brownstein and what Dita has said, is that there are solutions that are being put in place, and they're not just one or two, there are many options, so that this mushroom effect that has happened over the last number of years is not going to continue. And so that not only does it not continue, but that the current pop-up synagogues that are affecting the sanctity and the serenity of so many people's lives are not going to continue doing what they're doing unless they decide that they'd like to conform and integrate exactement comme il était sur l'avenue de Bailey avec Rav Moyal. That's what I'd like to say. And I think it's important that also what Dita mentioned before is that instead of looking at one issue with a portion of the community against another portion of the community, it's important to look at a community together, okay? And I like to think of community really with the last 5 letters in the word community, and that's unity. So even though there are differences, and they may, and portions of our community may pray differently, they may look different, they may want to keep their grass higher than some other people, we shouldn't be looking at this issue with us versus them versus us. It's a matter of looking on how we can integrate people into not necessarily a melting pot, but a mosaic where we all have a harmonious and sanctity of life. And I know that I've spoken to Mrs. Treston, I've spoken to her husband, Jerry, and I've seen with my own eyes that here are residents who have been in Côte Saint-Luc, like me, for basically their entire life, and the sanctity of their life is being compromised. And that is not something to take lightly. These are people who have lived in Côte Saint-Luc for over 50 years, they've paid their taxes, they have more of a right to enjoy the sanctity of life because they've given their lives to being those taxpayers. A reason why we have the ACC, the arena, all of these parks, are for all of these constituents who have been here their whole lives. They're the ones, you are all the ones who have more of a right than anyone else because you've laid the seeds here and planted and paid your taxes for all of these years. If there's not someone who's going to speak up so that your sanctity of life is not given back, then I don't know what to say. And I take this with a lot of passion because, like I said, this is not the Côte Saint-Luc that I remember, with intimidation and with people fearing for their families and not having that serenity and sanctity on their streets. This is not the Côte Saint-Luc that I grew up in, and this is certainly not the Côte Saint-Luc that I'm pledging to allow to continue. I have my children here in Côte Saint-Luc as well, and I will not allow them to be subjected to this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Amen.
Et merci
Thank
beaucoup
you.
pour tous les compliments.
Ah, les compliments étaient offerts vraiment sincèrement. Ethan, il est vraiment en amour avec toi.
Okay.
Merci.
Merci Armand, merci Jeff. All right, we are approaching 8:30. Tracy wants to say something, or do you want to put it in the chat? Tracy, do you want to talk or you want to put it in the chat? I don't know.
No, I have nothing to say, sorry.
All right, thank you. Okay, so do we have other questions? Have I answered all your questions? I don't know, maybe the issue of tax exemption is not completely clear. I can address that for a moment. There's two types of tax exemptions, just for your information. The first is the place of worship itself. So that's under Article 204 of the Tax Act of the la loi des, I don't, anyway, it's the Tax Act, Municipal Tax Act. So basically that is an exemption for the place of worship. And then there's another exemption, which is 100%. Then there's another exemption for the rabbi who is attached to that place of worship. So we have one rule in Côte Saint-Luc, and I thought, you know, that this was the rule that everyone was going to follow, is one synagogue, one rabbi. So even if you have one synagogue that's non-conforming, that is a place of worship that doesn't have the zoning, but at least it's a place of worship and it was recognized by the evaluation department. It's not the Quebec government, it's the evaluation department of the city of Montreal that fixes the exemptions. They give the exemptions. So they gave an exemption for a non-conforming use. That non-conforming use is allowed to have one rabbi, and that rabbi is the priest or the rabbi, like the church at on Guelph is allowed to have one rabbi, and that priest or rabbi, his home or her home is exempt up to a certain amount. So it could be exempt up to, let's say, $350,000 because it's always indexed every year. But this new phenomenon that just happened over the past 5 years, and we discovered it in 2017 when I was interim mayor between Anthony and Mitchell, was that all of a sudden we have one synagogue, 4 rabbis, because there's the rabbi that belongs to the synagogue, and then there's 3 rabbis who are rabbis in residence. And we did contest it. right away, as soon as we found out about it, we went to court. We didn't sort of sit back and say, oh, you know, that's a mistake. No, we contested it. We went to what's called the Tribunal Administratif. And at the Tribunal Administratif, unfortunately, we were told that, yes, it's like a nunnery, like a convent, and it's accessory to the main use. So basically what happens is the non-conforming synagogue, which is not conforming to zoning, is like the tree. And then it has one branch, which is the rabbi, and then it has a whole bunch of other branches, which are accessory, which are also non-conforming, which are also tax exempt, because it's coming out of this one non-conforming use. And that's where I have said it before. I've said it in April 2019 when I gave a speech on this subject. And I can show you a little part of my intervention if you're interested. We can show that's like 2 minutes of it, or you can watch it online, but I do want to post it. That's where I've said that tolerance leads to abuse. And that's why we have to, you know, we have to rein in this phenomenon. So if Mark can find the video, you can start it at 0 and go to 2 minutes, just to explain a little bit of the background of where this came, you know, how this came to be.
Yep,
No.
I'm putting it on, just a second
Okay,
here.
all right. So this is a video of a council meeting. So it's in the public record. And this is a meeting where we were debating the sale of public land to the Kollel in April 2019. And unfortunately, at that time, we did not put the conditions that I felt were reasonable. And so what happened was the sale went through with Councillor Kovac, Councillor Stephen Erdely, and myself dissenting. So if you just want to hear the first 2 minutes, Mark will play it for you.
Et quand le conseiller
We can hear it now.
dit que the community has outgrown their home and they need to move on to another home, ça c'est un thème que j'aimerais reprendre. Et aussi quand on parle de renouveau, parce que j'aimerais vous expliquer exactement ma position par rapport à cette situation. Je vais m'exprimer en anglais parce que j'ai écrit mes notes en anglais, mais peut-être que je vais faire des commentaires en français aussi. Council today will be voting on the sale of public land near the Public Works Yard to a foundation to be used for religious purposes. This has come up as a result of a few years of discussion and negotiations. This is not the first time the city is doing this. You may recall we did it in the past for Chabad. And in principle, I am not opposed to this sale or to considering accommodation for religious institutions.
I think that that was sufficient. It's a 13-minute video. You can hear it. I'm going to post it in, I don't know if you could put the link in the chat if anyone wants to watch it. But it basically explains all the dynamics of what went down at that time and what we're trying to fix and what we're trying to correct going forward. So I see that there are no more questions. You've heard from the mayor, you've heard from me, you've heard from Jeff. Unless anyone has any other questions, I just invite you to think and to reflect upon, you know, how important this election is, and that these are issues that we're going to have to face head on in the next 4 years. And I'm looking forward to the support of all those residents who feel that this will be going in the right direction. Based on what the mayor has and I have explained to you, and we look forward to, you know, to making it right and to finding the right balance, because that's the most important thing, to find the right balance so that we can move forward as a community united and you know, enjoying each other in Côte Saint-Luc. So unless anyone has anything else to add, I am going to end the session and thank you very much. I would like to invite you next week to hear about Meadowbrook. That's a really interesting subject. And I see that Fred Lieber is on, and he is my special guest next week. We did a video about the speeding on Cavendish. And again, I repeat to you that the mayor and I are committed to reducing the speed on Cavendish because it has become a raceway. We recognize that, but we are collecting the data from the radar. And once we have all the data and all the information, we will be able to, to make an informed decision as to how we should adjust the speed. And that should be coming up in the next couple, we're going to get the reports as soon as the new mandate starts. And finally, on a really happy note, more or less, well, sort of happy. Mayor Plante, candidate Mayor Plante yesterday made an announcement about the Hippodrome. She's going to turn the Hippodrome into a carbon neutral neighborhood, which is great for us because we don't want more cars in Décarie, right? So we don't want more cars in Hippodrome. We're happy if they make it into carbon neutral, let them fly in by helicopter, magic carpet, shuttle buses, whatever levitation, whatever way they can get in there, except in cars, because we've got enough cars on the Décarie-Cavendish corridor. But there's going to be a report. We're going to have a little story about it, I think, in tomorrow's press, probably the Gazette, because there's still some parts of that statement, of that announcement that are missing. And that's with regard to the design of the road. And so you can follow that story. If it's not published in the Gazette, the mayor and I will definitely make it public. So we are pushing for easier access to residents in Côte Saint-Luc, and we're looking forward to actually making it happen in this mandate. I'm very, very hopeful that it will happen in this next mandate. Because the Cavendish will come through as a transit-oriented road. Basically, lots of transit, lots of rapid transit, and also for cars. So thank you, good evening, and à la prochaine. Bye-bye. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Dita.